You had to get the occupancy up. You had to renovate the properties. How did you even sequence the job?
By the time that I got there, I think I may have had 20 to 30 units that were already renovated. Mind you, it's a 330 unit property, so that was still 300 units approximately that were not touched. And to know that it was under 50% occupied, that was going to be a challenge, right? And so I needed to know inventory. What do I have? What can I lease? What can we start gaining income or money on? Which units can you give me? So I did ask for a list from construction of their current rehabs because it was first insurance before the bond came in. And they provided me with that list. And that's the list that I went by. And I contacted the local housing authorities to make sure they knew that we had this availability. So if you have someone with a voucher, send them my way. So definitely marketing the ones that have been renovated to make sure that we can fill them up as quick as possible.
How did you manage that process so that you got it to where it is today?
We're working on 6 2-bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and they should be finished by this date. So at that point, I can go to a prospect and say, hey, I have this coming online around this time. But of course, we're at the mercy of construction. So just be a little flexible. And if that time works for that applicant or prospect, then we have a deal, right? So sometimes we had to shift focus. Maybe they had a plan to do building 8 and it was only 3 bedrooms, but I need building 5 and 6 because they have the most 1 and 2 bedrooms. And that's what the prospects need right now. And let me go ahead and maximize and capitalize from that to go ahead and get this income coming in so that we could just move forward and make sure that bills are paid, because if it's property funded, every dollar that we collect goes out to operations, and that takes up a lot of the budget. So let me just go ahead and see how I can get these people in the unit the quickest, and how can I relate this to the construction team so that they can prioritize what they're making ready first. It wouldn't be anything without my team. And I now look at affordable housing as a bridge to these families owning homes. So letting them know their resources, letting them know that there are some people that offer these classes for you to get a job or just whatever. Some people don't know that they can go and get a trade. You know, they don't know where to start. And it's not about just helping these people get a place, but how do we build them once they're there? That's where my mind is now, because this shouldn't have to be forever. So we partnered with this nonprofit, and they had set up an office in our office space, and they offer things like transportation to and from their medical appointments, telehealth for some of these things. They offer free classes and education courses for IT, phlebotomy, after school things for the kids that are there, things like that.
That one asset in Dallas, I signed a letter of intent yesterday to sell that asset for 5 times more than what we paid for it, literally. And I think we bought it 10 and a half years ago. And we put a lot of money in this. This is not a windfall of cash for us, but it will put some money in the bank. It will allow us to carry our mission forward and allow the next owner to come in to a really well-positioned asset that's already renovated and bring some of their creativity and keeping the residents happy and keeping the units full.
All right, welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Today, we got the OG, Alvin Hope Johnson, and we have Roger Adams on the call today. And today we're going to be discussing a little bit about our existing portfolio, how we came about these properties, what our original intentions are, and then we're going to bring Roger on there because he's really the guy to help turn all these properties around and get it to the shape that it is in today. So I'm excited for all of you guys to learn, get a little gist of our portfolio, and then, most importantly, understand what it actually means to be in a day of life with Roger Adams overseeing all these properties. So, Alvin, welcome back to the show. First, how are you doing today, man?
Yeah, doing great, man. I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Man, I am fantastic. I love talking with this group. I am always jazzed when I see these podcasts on my calendar because I know I'm just going to have just great conversations with some family and friends. So that's what I'm excited about.
I love it.
Roger, how you doing today, man?
Man, I am great. I'm happy to be here and to talk about my experiences because I've learned a lot. So,
all right, Roger, we have to start with you first. Just give us a little bit of background about yourself, and then we're going to flip over to Alvin so that he can provide some context. But give us a little bit of story about yourself and how'd you even get into this space?
Okay, well, of course, I am from New Orleans. And when I was an undergrad, getting into property management kind of fell in my lap. I was just trying to find a job, and I was a marketing whatever. I just took a job, right? Because I'm an undergrad trying to make ends meet. So I'm like, what is property management? I don't know, but I will show up, you know. And
hold on. He said undergrad a couple of times. So that tells you that he's highly educated. Well, I just want to make that point.
Well, yeah, I'm knowledgeable. But yes, in undergrad for sure, it just came out of nowhere. I didn't know what property management was, and I just showed up, and I just continued to show up because I am inquisitive. I like to know. I like to know everything. And from marketing, I became a leasing agent. From leasing agent, I became an assistant manager, left and did single family housing, commercial for an investor in Plano, went back to New Orleans, became a property manager over a lot of lease ups, constructions, luxury lease ups, started off in student housing as well. And honestly, Kent, I started building a house in Texas and I did not have a job in Texas. I just know that I wanted to be here. And when my company that I currently work for offered the opportunity to grow into, in Texas, I said yes because they didn't know I was building a house there. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I was like, well, I'm just going to try to get there. So it was literally God's work, right? It's just everything aligned the way it should. So then I met Alvin, now 4 years ago, and I was in a room with people I had never met. I was a regional at that point for about a good 6 to 12 months, 6 months to a year. And, Alvin talking about bond deals, didn't even know what that was, Kent. And so it was just a lot of learning from day one. And now we're here. I didn't know what South Dallas was. I didn't know any of the markets. I had to throw myself in there. And, it's going back to the beginning where I showed up, and I continue to do that.
Well, I love to say that, Roger. Sometimes when you go into something not knowing exactly what to do, we look for better and creative solutions, and we're not tied down from how things have traditionally been run. And that allows us to come up with new, innovative ideas to actually take it to the next level. So I'm really excited that you're part of the team now, and you've been part of the team, most importantly. So thank you so much for what you're doing, Roger. Let me move over to Alvin. Alvin, set the stage for us. Roger kind of got drop shipped into here and said, go take care of everything. Give us some context behind what the portfolio was like back then. What was our original intentions, and set the stage for us, man.
Man, when Roger showed up, we had just refinanced 512 units, and all of them needed extensive rehab. One of them here in Dallas had some damage from the storm that had happened in 2021. Those units haven't been completely put back together yet, so we're in the process of rehabbing 100 units that way. There was 200 additional units in Dallas that needed to be rehabbed, plus the exteriors. The property was about 50% occupied in Dallas, so it was not holding on. The 2 properties in South Texas were full. They always are. They work well all the time. But we still had a lot of rehab to do. I think we had about 10 or 12 down units in South Texas that needed to be rehabbed as well. And Ken, I had reached my bandwidth. So I was being the president, the management company. I was of our own management company. I'm president of the foundation, running our own rehab projects. I'm helping settle insurance claims with our contractor while putting together 4 other major ground up development. And I had hit the wall. And so when this all happened, it was perfect timing. I always knew from my experience anyway, in these really tough, challenging neighborhoods where our goal was to just go in and make life better for the people that live there. And in the process, do well while doing well. We wanted to make some money in the process of doing that. Do good while doing good. I knew that nobody's going to manage your asset the way you will manage your own asset. I don't care what they say. But when Roger came in, Roger took an approach kind of the way I've had. He rolled his sleeves up and he sat behind the manager's desk to figure out what was going on at all these assets. It has been a challenge over the last 2 years, getting all the work done and the occupancy up, but we're there. I think our rehab took 6 months longer than it should have. That's no reflection on the management or the rehab guy. It was just a lot of work that had to be done between the renovation of what we were doing and what we were currently doing when we closed on the loan. Those units were down to the studs. So it wasn't just some quick unit turn. So I'll tell you, I think it was last September. Yeah, it was September when we realized, okay, rehab is going to be done in 60 days. We're at 60 some odd % occupancy, and we got to be above 90 by the end of October. no questions asked, something like that, in 60 days. And that's just on the one asset. And so the status of the portfolio today, I'll let Roger tell you what the occupancy numbers are. But that one asset in Dallas, I signed a letter of intent yesterday to sell that asset for 5 times more than what we paid for it, literally. And I think we bought it 10 and a half years ago. And we put a lot of money in it. So this is not a windfall of cash for us. But it will put some money in the bank. It will allow us to carry our mission forward and allow the next owner to come in to a really well-positioned asset that's already renovated and bring some of their creativity and keeping the residents happy and keeping the units full. And
thanks.
That's where I'm at, and I'll be quiet.
Love it. Well, Alvin, are these the properties that we refinance with tax-exempt bonds to finance?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Awesome. And these bonds are locked out for 5 to 7 years. But we financed these at a period of time where the rates were really low. No, they weren't really low, but they were about 4.5. Compared to now, that's really low. And so our bondholder is saying, yeah, we'll let you pay those off without a penalty, because he'll put his money back on the street at 7%. So we just hit a perfect storm, if I can call it, because it was a storm for a minute. And just let that be a lesson to us. If you're in a storm, just keep walking, because it will pass. You're going through hell, don't stop. Yeah, keep going, because you'll walk your way out of it. So that's probably the last year and a half of my life has taught me a lot of that. Just don't quit. There's always a resolution.
Well, don't quit and look for the right people. And we're so happy that Roger came in the right place. And I'm always a firm believer in who, not how. When you're feeling like you're in a funk, sometimes it's just getting the right person into the mix to kind of help you solve the problem. So Alvin, thanks for setting the stage. Roger, tell us a little about what was it like kind of stepping into this whole pile of work, is what I'll call it.
I can't say that it was a lot. It was a lot. I can't say that I was intimidated, though, because I kind of had been in the business for a while. You know, it was just what's always the hurdle. Of course, the learning curve for me is the fact that I have to know the property, know the market, get to know the staff, get to know all of these new things, you know, and that was more so the hurdle. And when I landed here in Dallas, the South Texas properties they run well. You know, the staff is steady, the occupancy, the collections, all of those things, they just work. Here in Dallas is where I spent most of my time. And I had to get to know the neighborhood that was, for most, could be a bit daunting. You know, it's low income neighborhood, high crime. I walked into a fire watch that was ongoing because of broken sprinklers, because of the freeze that happened the year prior. I walked into risk management from the city of Dallas because of all of the crime that had happened on the property. So we were having to talk to the city of Dallas code compliance every other day because they just saw all the boards on the windows. They saw the broken gates. Everything was just broken. And I had 0 staff. You know, so I literally had to roll up my sleeves and sit behind that desk and go through each file, just pick something to start, because I didn't know where to start. So I'm like, where do I begin? So I went back to my basic knowledge of property management, right? I had to go check to make sure that I have files on all of the residents that were there. We were below 50%. I had to check on collections. Like, are these people just sitting here? Like, is Alvin or the ownership making money? Are they able to pay the bills? Looking at any lingering items to tie up those things. But also in the midst of that, I had to find a staff because I couldn't do it by myself. You know, I am no better than my team. And I do believe in that. So, but in order for me to lead a team, which was the most daunting part for me, is that I can't lead if I don't know, because I like to lead by example. So, and having to learn all of these different markets and all of these different things about this portfolio, and then learning what a bond was and having to relay that to my staff and keep them up with the ever growing knowledge of what tax credit is and how it changes year by year. those things, I had to prioritize, of course. But again, I had to start somewhere. And when I got there, I had Melanie, who's she works with Alvin, and she gave me what she knew. And she was there alone, and she was ready for me to get there because she had other things and other plans. So I was kind of thrown into the water and I had to swim. And I'm okay with that because that's how I learn. I'm okay with it. So again, it wasn't as intimidating as most would perceive, but the daunting part for me was to get in and to learn as quick as possible so that I can get a staff and be able to teach them exactly what this property is or these properties are. Get them, because every property has its own personality in this business, everyone. So just to get to know all these things. So yeah,
man, that's so enlightening, Roger, because taking a really structured approach about, wow, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I can start figuring out piece by piece, right? Let me ask the question this way. If you were to walk into the same workload again and the same properties, knowing what you know now, what might have you decided to start getting yourself familiar with, if that's the correct question? Because you mentioned there's some tax credit bonds here and some compliance issues. Just interested to hear what your thoughts were. Like, would the first thing be talking to residents? Would the first thing be getting really educated about what it means to be in a tax exempt bond deal, right? Tell us a little bit of your insight there.
Well, tax credit has different designations. So each unit could have a different, when I say designation, it could be a 50% unit or 60% or a market unit. And that's what that makeup of Ebon Village was. So I had to know what units allow this type of income, what unit can allow this type of income, making sure that I have the paperwork to back all of that. That will be the first thing that I would learn at these type of or I would try to sharpen on these type of properties, because you have to know that, because the state has monitoring authorities that will come in and do these audits, and if there is one thing that's wrong, we can lose tax credits on some of these things, or we can just have these fines and all of this, because it's very serious. This is state funding, government funding for whatever type of loan backing that you may have. But for Ebon Village specifically, getting in that property and knowing what type of tax credit designations it has, when's the last time it had an inspection, and how did that go? Getting into each resident's file first to make sure that I have that base of things and information, so that if I were to be hit with that audit I guess within that 30-day time frame of me first being there, I could be at least prepared for that. Then I can get to the management side of it all. And I think that it's kind of simplified, but it's still a lot of steps within that, because, making sure that I have all of this paperwork for this tax credit compliance, and then to have a team member double check. And I really didn't have a team member here aside from Melanie. And it was just me. So the first thing that I would do is to get to know that property, know your designations, know the status of your files, know some of the common issues that property may face, and then start there for sure.
Got it. I love that you mentioned compliance and understanding auto regulations, because the number one thing we want to do is make sure we follow the rules of the sandbox and we don't go to jail, right? That's very, very important. Just to make it real for the audience, tell us about like one or two things that you have to comply. Is it like having evidence of receipts, keeping track of the repairs? Like, what are we talking about in terms of compliance? Just give us one or two examples. It does not have to be more than that.
So for one, we have to make sure that in affordable housing that this person qualifies to live here. So are they not telling us, or are they giving us all the information that we need, like as far as their income, having to check bank statements sometimes to make sure that they're reporting all of their income, that type of thing. And also there's a whole physical part to this compliance. Like, is the GFCI working in their apartment? Because if that particular unit had a Section 8 backing, we can lose funds if that GFI isn't working. So just making sure that everything is operable to the state's or the city's standard, but also making sure that these people that are here actually qualify to be here, because that will get us into some big trouble.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Roger, because sometimes people forget how much compliance work there is. Sometimes when people look at deals, Roger, to be honest with you, they look at a spreadsheet, they plug in some numbers, and they're like, oh, yeah, we can make this work. But then they quickly get into it and they're like, whoa, this is a lot of work. This is way more than I thought. I didn't know I had to verify income and assets for every single person. If I don't do it, then people withhold rent. Like the government can withhold rent from you. Or if you miss a simple outlet because there's so many outlets in an apartment, you miss one of them, you fail an inspection. Now all of a sudden you're not going to get your rent because you failed an inspection. So these are all these fine details that I really want the audience to learn. And thank you for making it real just now, Roger, because then they can be like, oh, I remember Roger talking about this on a podcast before. I better go make sure X and X, or I better be aware that if I'm buying this property and I cannot afford to have an on-site manager to handle all of these compliance needs, how on earth am I going to manage the amount of administrative workload that's going to be associated with operating a government-backed property or government-assisted property?
And allow me to interject because, and you yourself mentioned the bonds. That added a whole nother level of compliance because it has its own separate compliance that we have to adhere to for that. There's 30% of the units and within this portfolio at each site that we have to do full recertifications on, and then they were post 15, which means they were post after the 15 years, we didn't have to do full recertifications, check income, all of those things. But now with the new bond, 30% of each property, we have to do that, so that bond added a whole nother layer of compliance. So it can get really deep, depends on what type of bonds you have.
All right. So people love this podcast as we get into the details. You just said recertification. Can you explain what recertification means?
So more so at a 5.9 property, which is a Section 8 or HUD. With recertifications, you have to ensure that this person qualifies for the next year. So in recerting, if someone got a new job and, the AMI or the income limit was 40,000 and now they're making 41 or $40,005, you can't live here anymore. So we have to be able to recertify and make sure that these people are still able to live at, whatever their respective sites.
Got it. And that's really meeting your compliance, especially you have set asides for the apartment complex for a certain income threshold for a household. This is why and how you qualify for the tax exempt status on some of these bonds. So I just want to make sure that's super clear for everybody. It's like not only are you doing it for yourself, but there's also compliance to make sure that the tax exempt status you're earning is truly earned by you doing the right compliance and proving to the appropriate agencies or authorities that you have intended to help the people that the tax exemption was intended to help.
That's
All
right.
right. So, Roger, we just learned a lot from you about compliance. Sometimes it's not the most exciting thing, but it's also so important. Let's talk about the properties now. You had to get the occupancy up. You had to renovate the properties. What sort of action steps did you have to take with your team to essentially, how did you even sequence a job? Because that's really the number one step sometimes, or the number one question I get from people. It's like, all right, this sounds like a massive project. If you had to do it again, like how would you start it?
Prior to taking on this, I may have taken the time to visit similar properties. See how they operate, know their vendors, know like how they report to TDHCA, which is one of our monitoring authorities, But to start there, I had to, get a staff because I had no one, I literally had no one under me, and it was just me working for the management company that was there. So finding someone who actually is okay to be in those type of areas, because a lot of people are not okay with those areas. And then you have to find someone who has a basic knowledge of what tax credit is and building a staff, because the Dallas property is 330 units. And to know that it was under 50% occupied, that was going to be a challenge, right? And to know like the units that I was going to have ready. So I had to communicate with the construction team. I don't want to lose sight of your question though. So if you don't mind.
No. So let's talk about it, right? So you're taking on this project and you have 50% occupancy. So did you right away hire somebody? Did you right away start talking to the construction and say, hey, let's get these 50 units rehab as soon as possible so I can fill them? What was the strategy there?
I needed to know inventory. What do I have? What can I lease? What can we start gaining income or money on? Like which units can you give me? So I did ask for a list from construction of their current rehabs because it was first insurance before the bond came in, right? And they provided me with that list, and that's the list that I went by. And making sure that I contacted the local housing authorities to make sure they knew that we had this availability. So if you have someone with a voucher, send them my way. We can make something work. I can provide housing for these people. So making sure that everyone around us, marketing, right, know that I know that it looks like a lot going on. There's a lot going on right now, but we still have available units where you can live, and then they actually look really nice. So,
well, I love that you start marketing the property right away to at least let people know and build those relationships with people that there's availability, because it takes time for people to move into a unit. So I love that you got ahead of that. So it sounds like you got ahead in marketing, and then you started the renovations on the empty units. How many units needed to be renovated roughly?
by the time that I got there, I think I may have had 20 to 30 units that were already renovated. Mind you, it's a 330 unit property, so that was still 300 units approximately that were not touched. So definitely marketing the ones that have been renovated to make sure that we can fill them up as quick as possible, because at the end of the day, we need heads and beds to pay our bills. So definitely.
That's right. I love that. And then how did you work with the construction company or the renovation company to project manage? Because it seems like a lot, man. I already hear how many empty units you got to market. I already hear how many units you had to renovate. That's an incredible amount of work. And now you also had to think about, well, how do I make sure the contractor's doing? Did you have somebody helping you? Did you have a weekly touch point with the construction management? Like, how did you manage that process so that you got it to where it is today?
Well, Melanie, she was there by herself for a while. So I called her the Bible. I'm like, Ebon's Bible, so she was my reference to like everything that she knew. I'm like, I need to know everything that you know about this property, all the units. I don't know what construction is working on next, because I can market those if you could tell me. So she kind of communicated, or was my liaison in a sense, to tell me like, hey, well, we're working on 6 2-bedrooms, 3 3-bedrooms, and they should be finished by this date. So at that point, I can go to a prospect and say, hey, I have this coming online around this time. But of course, we're at the mercy of construction, so just be a little flexible. And if that time works for that applicant or prospect, then we have a deal, right? And it just took a lot of that back and forth communication and knowing where construction was. And if we could get material, because that was a whole nother part to that thing, and making sure that the funds were sent so that they can order the material. And then that time allotted for that, it could prove daunting, because there were a lot of people that turned away because the timeliness of certain turns and things like that. But again, like Alvin said, you have to just keep walking through the storm, right? So I went to the next. Well, somebody's going to take this 3-bedroom right today.
Man, Roger, I'm so glad you brought up some of these specific details, and I just want to pull them out really quick, because guess what? For the audience listening right now, we have a mix, Roger, of single family investors to multifamily and ground up construction folks that listen to this. And what I've seen from most people that are successful is that they don't try to know 100% of the information in order to get things started. Like for you, as an example, you got thrown in here and you try to figure out. So you said, all right, this new thing about tax exempt bonds, let me learn this. All right, what can I do right now to get some cash flow coming into the doors by renting out these units? Boom. I think you had a great sort of prioritization process in your head that you were going after the right things. Yeah. And then afterwards, you're like, all right, how do I understand the sequencing of working with construction management? Do they need the money first so they can order supplies for the renovations? And these are things that you might have never known about until you actually got into it and you're like, oh, okay, this time for the next project, I know I need to go ask the construction company and say, hey, have you ordered this already? Because you want to start your renovation here on this turn, blah, 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 blah. Because that's how you stay on top of them to make sure that they're thinking through the right sequencing. And I think you have done that beautifully just by going through the fire.
That's correct, because I had to, I needed to know, like, I have so many prospects coming in today for 1 and 2 bedrooms. Can y'all have a focus there, because sometimes we had to shift focus. Maybe they had a plan to do building 8 and it was only 3 bedrooms. And I'm using this as an example, but I need building 5 and 6 because they have the most 1 and 2 bedrooms. And that's what the prospects need right now. And if that's going to be the market for now, let me go ahead and maximize and capitalize, from that, because I need to go ahead and get this income coming in so that we could just move forward and make sure that everyone is happy, so and the bills are paid, because if it's property funded, every dollar that we collect, it goes out to operations, unforeseen expenses. The property in Texas or in Dallas has plumbing issue, right? So there's a whole, and that takes up a lot of the budget, those type of expenses like that. And knowing that, okay, well, I know that this may happen. I know this is I'm going to have to pay coming up. So let me just go ahead and see, how I can get these people in the unit the quickest, and how can I relate this to the construction team so that they can prioritize what they're making ready first.
Oh man, thanks for sharing that example. Because I think sometimes people forget that they can need to pivot. Like they're so structured to a plan. Like, all right, the 3 bedrooms are getting renovated this month. But you came in and said, hey, let's pivot a little bit. I got way more demand for 1 and 2 bedrooms. That's perfect reaction and a perfect pivot to what the market is giving you. It's kind of like the same thing in basketball and sports. You have to take what the defense gives you sometimes so you know where to attack, right? So good, man.
You have to know your opponent, right? You have to know like what you're up against in order to like maneuver and dance. I like to call it, I need to know the dance, so, and they work really well to make that happen for me, because Alvin, that deadline that he mentioned was true. We had 60 days to get to 90% occupied, and we did, but it took, again, going back to me being an undergrad, me showing up, right? I was there. I was there every day. I showed up to every nonprofit in the area that helped low income families and low income households, single people, whatever. And I made those relationships. I'm like, what can you offer me? What can you offer my residents? I now have a whole nother outlook about affordable housing. I don't even know if I go back to market, because I look at affordable as a bridge program for people owning homes. So I'm trying to set someone up to know that, there's assistance out there, that you can get to meet your goals. And we've created that, there, even through all of that, all of the compliance and all of the lease ups and all of that, because that's still a whole nother component with the residents, right? Making sure that they remain happy with all the construction going on, people getting paint on their cars and all of this thing. So it's a lot of communicating every day, wearing different hats, and just keeping people abreast of dates, times, things of that nature.
Man, I'm so glad you brought up communication. That's just such a fundamental skill, I think, that just goes unnoticed. And when you communicate well, one, you provide clarity, you provide comfort, but more importantly, you make the residents feel that you care. You care about their lives. We're just not some corporation that's coming in and blah, 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 and running and bulldozing over everybody. You're truly thinking about their lives. So I want to talk a little bit about a day in the life of Roger Adams. Tell me about a typical day, what kind of problems you might be running into, so that I really want the folks that say, hey, let me give you a little background. A lot of people like to say, Roger, hey, I just want to help people. I really love helping people, but they don't really understand who they want to help and how they want to help. But you are in a unique role where you and your team are dealing with residents every day, and you're truly positively impacting their lives every single day. Tell us a little bit about a day in your life and what kind of problems you're trying to do or solve or help with.
After I became acclimated to the site, I did start to reach out to the residents, right? I wanted to host meetings. Like specifically, it started with crime meetings, because I need to know like what's happening, where it's happening, what do you know, who do you know? And so having those meetings, and then even contacting Dallas PD to have some of these people show up to these meetings so that they can see like, hey, you have someone to talk to, you have someone to reach out to, making sure they have that security number. But day to day, I start off every day by speaking with each one of my managers. I make sure that I just ask if there's any type of problem items or priority items that need to be taken care of, or something that they don't have access to do within the system, because that's a whole nother thing, right? We have different softwares that we use to keep track of our numbers, percentages, and all of that. So sometimes they run into issues like that, but sometimes they don't know how to deal with an angry resident, or sometimes they don't know how to relay that, hey, we have to come into your unit because there's a leak that's underground, and you won't be able to stay there while we do this. So trying to keep them comfortable and, I guess, again, abreast of like what's going on. So I will talk to my managers, make sure that they have a priority list of things like, hey, your percentages at 95%. I do want us to be at 99% by the end of the month. Do we need any specials? Making sure that they have all the tools that are necessary first. And then after I speak with them, I can go to my thing. I can check their leasing efforts. I can check their collection efforts. I could pull all the reports that I need to comb through and see if there is a problem, where it lies. And let's say if for Ebon Village leasing, right? So if we're having this big leasing issue, or they're having issues with converting prospects to residents, I go to a log. There's a prospect log in my software that we use. And I'm like, do they follow up? How many times do they follow up with these residents? Are they staying in touch? Well, applicants, I'm sorry. Are they staying in touch, or they're in their faces? Because sometimes we can get comfortable and think that one call can win someone over, and they can tell you, yeah, I'll be there, and then they don't show, right? Do we call them again, or do we just let them go? Well, we're going to call them again and again until they tell us to stop, or we see that this is just nothing for them. So that's just one issue, right? As an example that we would have to face, because that it's a current issue right now, trying to make sure that we remain stabilized. And if we evict 10 people, we have to move 10 more in, So other than that, I will go through the day. I'm probably speaking to my site staff all day, because I like to know. I like to know everything, so that if Alvin were to come to ask me a question, or the investors or whoever, I'd be able to answer that question for them and be sound in that answer, because I know, and then that comes with trust too, and being able to, because my South Texas properties are 6 hours away. So I just can't show up there. I can, I don't mind. And I've done a day trip there if they need me. So I just try to gauge. I ask them, if they have the tools necessary to successfully do their job for the day. And in doing so, I'm just asking about any type of priority issues or priority items. So.
Ooh, all right. I love how you're managing your team, Roger, because it shows that, one, you are asking about KPIs, right? You said occupancy. I want to get it from 95 to 99% for another month. And you're able to post them, but give them tangible steps on what they need to do and how they need to go about it, that they can achieve the results that you're looking for. And I love the crystal clarity that you have in how you communicate. That's really cool. Now, you mentioned about talking to your site managers every day and wanting to know everything that's going on. Tell me about what's a type of problem that you have to personally get involved with. Are we talking about it has to be like a fire or a crime before you get involved, or what are we talking about here?
Sometimes the managers just don't know how to relay, even though we can say the same things, but sometimes I can say it different, and teaching them that, hey, I have your back, but just try to say it this way, because, we're met with these different personalities, and then my managers have their own personalities. So situations like that, sometimes when there's a really, 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 really angry resident that just want to talk to corporate, that's me, but I just make sure I get enough information as possible from my manager, so that they can know, I'm like, hey, I need to know exactly what happened, so that I can figure a solution, but be correct, because we have to, there's a whole nother component called fair housing in this. And we have to make sure that we're treating everyone the same. So that's just one thing. But sometimes there's a certain amount that they can't pull the trigger on when it comes to invoices or quotes. Like if there was a plumbing issue that was $5,000, that we have a quote for, that's $5,000. I usually ask for like 3 quotes. Of course, that's kind of typical. But if it's around that price point, then at that point they come to me and say, hey, yeah, I can't find any lower bids, and they're not allowed to approve anything. I mean, 5,000 is a bit extensive. I would say I'm not a micromanager, but even if it's like $1,000, I'm like, you better tell me so that I can tell Alvin. And that everyone knows why we spent this, because, at the end of those months, I have to explain the variances as to why we were over in this GL account, so I like to stay on top of that as well. I guess another issue would be, I can't think of any right now, because it's day to day, right?
Yeah, but you gave us some perfect examples. Sometimes it's resident issues, sometimes it's a budget issue, and I love that you brought up an example. Or sometimes you just need to get involved with repairs that is over an X amount of dollar threshold, because that's how you have rules and controls in place to make sure that there's no leakages in the finances, is how I would call it.
Exactly. Right. I'm a stickler. So for everything that they purchase, I make sure that my managers have their budgets right on side of them so that they're just adhering to it, right? Because in the end, I have to answer for it. And so I always tell them, I like to be prepared. I don't know about y'all. I like to help prepare y'all because some of these questions can come to you. So y'all need to know as well. So,
and I think I really like the culture of you establishing that people care. Because I think that's really where businesses can go awry is when you have so many people that stops caring or say like, oh, they don't pay me enough to care. And that's never a good result in any business. And if an asset does not create enough revenue or cash flow to sustain its operations, that's not a good position for anybody in, from the residents, the owners of the property, or the investors. So I love that you brought that up. Roger, I want to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about how you are helping people in the community get access to a rental. Do you have any stories of people you've helped place into these rentals that you can share with us? Because I really want to outline the profound impact that housing has on a family.
So there are so many examples, Ken. And as I said earlier, I now look at affordable housing as a bridge, to these families owning homes. So letting them know their resources, letting them know that there are some people that offer these classes for you to get a job or just whatever. I've been doing that. I won't speak on any specifics because there are so many that I've seen people come and just say, thank you. I was living in my car, or I've been in a hotel for like 2 weeks, and to see people shed actual tears because they received a key, to an apartment, even if it was just a 1-bedroom apartment to start, that's that moment that keeps me going. But how do we build them once they're there, and that's where my mind is now, because this shouldn't have to be forever. Affordable housing doesn't have to be forever. There's so many things, and some people, I hate to use the word, but so many ignorances it ripples through the community. So I partnered with South Dallas Employment Project, specifically here in Dallas, for Ebon Village, and they set up an office in our office space, and they offer things like transportation to and from their medical appointments, telehealth for some of these things. They offer free classes and education courses for IT, phlebotomy, things like that, and they're even able to come and use their room or computers if they need to apply for a social security card or replacement and all these things. So they even provided they helped more than 300 families for Christmas, just for Toys for Tots, so having that readily available in my office has been, that makes me happy, because they come in and they go across the hall and they come back with all of these resources. Even if they needed financial assistance, it's right across the hall for me now, because we partner with this one nonprofit, and then they rotate nonprofits throughout. Right now we're doing the telehealth thing, but they still offer those same services that I just spoke of. And we're remodeling the old office for another nonprofit who's going to offer after school things for the kids that are there, because they matter too, right? And that's now my focus in helping the community, not just leasing them the apartment, but what do we do with them? Because of course I want you to stay here, as long as possible, because if you leave, my occupancy drops. But I would love to hear more stories that, we're buying a home, or we were able to rent a house, because I've got a job because of the courses that I took, things like that. So that is where my mind is now with this.
Man, Roger, the amount of good energy that you're pouring into this podcast, most importantly, but then into your community. Man, I really hope someone takes that little snippet that you just said, Roger, and just rewinds it and listens to it 10, 15 times, because this is why we do this. You're providing a safe roof over people's heads, but then you are going above and beyond. And this is what it ultimately takes to turn around a community, by providing them with the resources and the support so that not only they can succeed, but also their children. Man, that is so incredibly touching. And you are really the one that's having the profound impact, you and your team.
Yeah.
This is so cool, Roger.
It wouldn't be anything without my team. And again, to see the excitement, because some people don't know that they can go and get a trade. They don't know where to start. And some people don't even know how to use their cell phones when they walk into this office. So just sitting there and showing them like a routine, anytime you need to check this, and to see them walk away and come back and retain that makes a big difference for me. And again, going back to, it's not about just helping these people get a place, but what do we do? What's the next step in you getting this affordable housing? How do we prepare you for your next step? And I'm steadily still talking to people about different things. Anyone that's willing to help me, if they're offering, someone that will come by and say, hey, we have an excess of baby clothes and we just like to, donate to the property or have this event. I'm like, come on, my doors are open for all of that. And, I blast it, I let them know, and we have a good turnout for that. And those people are always very grateful. And their exit, I hate the software asks, why did you put in your notice? Why are you leaving? I would much rather see I bought a home, as opposed to I didn't like it here. Maintenance sucked, or I got, I found a better place that was, I don't want to hear any of that. I much rather control that as well, if I can, as much as possible.
Yes, Roger. That is so good, man. This has been a wonderful conversation, man. Let me ask you one more question. This is a question I ask every guest on the podcast that's come on. Why do you think affordable housing, particularly the lack of supply of affordable housing, is so hard to solve for? How do we get more supply of affordable housing?
Well, I think that if we can shift focus, Kent, yes, investors and owners and whatever can think of bottom lines and numbers and NOIs and all of these things, like how can I flip this and then I can get my money, but when you shift focus, and I get this from Alvin, and I tell everyone that I'm blessed to be in this setting, right? That you actually care about the people in these areas that actually need it, because there is a need for it. It's not it's not just these nice apartments or anything. It's people need places where they can afford to live and be comfortable and feel safe. And to get more, we just need to talk. I think if we can shift focus from, I guess, that standpoint, an investor standpoint, and down to like a bottom level or community level, and know that this is a real need, because we know what gentrification is. We know, especially being in Louisiana, in New Orleans specific, most people that I know cannot afford to even live in Orleans Parish because of how high and expensive it is. So now they've started to, every new build after a certain year, I forgot which year it was, they are required to have a certain tax credit component. And I think that's an awesome start. And we should, keep that, always have that affordable part with every new construction and build. And I mean, I don't know the legalities and the laws behind that right now, but I think that having that as a requirement, at least in New Orleans, would help so many people. People that are native to the city aren't even able to afford to live in the city because people are coming in and buying up everything, building up everything. And then you have a price point that no one can afford because everyone works in service or hotels and all of that. So making that tax credit or affordable component required was a great step towards solving that, solving or helping that issue. Because coming into affordable housing, I didn't know the huge need for it, and I grew up just like these people. And so I guess being able to have these conversations with these investors, to know that it's more than just the NOIs and more than you're really helping families and people and to get out of these situations or whatever, those who want to, right? But you have that platform to be able to provide that and then see the success, even if it's just 1 out of 330 people. That's a success. And when we start having these conversations about the need and that new shift, I won't say it's new. It's not original, I would hope, but me now thinking about how to make this a bridge for their next step, thinking more so that I think that will add a lot of, or help us solve that. So does that make sense?
Yeah, man. I loved your answer. You touched on so many points, and I would argue that having more people with a big heart like yourself, Roger, That's what's the true driving force behind this, and the change and the impact you've been able to generate within your community and turn around some lives for some folks that want to have their lives turned around. Man, that is so impactful. And I always think about understanding your why, because if your true intention is to help people, everything else just falls into place. If you're just chasing money and the highest returns, I tell some of my friends, just go buy a Bitcoin, right? It's at all-time highs right now. If that's what you want to do, and you're okay with that, go chase that. But in this scenario, you gotta have the heart to help people and turn their lives around, because this is the true impact you get in the emotional income, which I'm sure you can attest to with all the thank yous and all the tears that you've seen shed in front of you when they walk into these homes, Roger. That's worth way more than any amount of millions of dollars can ever do for me. So
I agree. It helps me show up the next day. So
yes. Well, today I hope people are able to learn from you, Roger, get inspired by you, and thank you so much for opening their eyes to another piece of real estate that people can get involved in that truly materially impacts the lives of residents every single day. And Roger, thank you so much for what you do, man. Without people like you, I would have never had the home I grew up in. If there were never people like you that were trying to set up translation centers or financial literacy classes, my parents, they didn't speak English when they come. So they didn't even know how to read letters. So without you putting in these support services, I don't know how my parents would ever survive. So thank you so much for what you do, Roger. Like it's truly impactful. And I'm so thankful to know you, to have you part of the team. And this has been an amazing conversation, man. I got to know you so well. And I'm so glad we had this conversation, man.
Well, thank you, Kent. It's my first, and I hope of many, because I want to keep talking about it, because Alvin has kind of instilled that passion into me, because I've seen him care so much. And I'm like, I want to see his vision through. Like we discussed, I'm like, I want to see this man's vision through, but also I'm being fulfilled as well. Like and they trust me, they trust me to do my job. And that's all I need. I don't even ask questions. Just I'll come to you when I need you, just let me go. But I appreciate the conversation as well, Kent.
Man, it's so great talking to an all-star, dude. That's all I got to say.
Likewise.
Hey, Roger, if people want to learn more about you, are you on Instagram? You on social media at all? Like, where can people reach out to you and find out more about you?
I'm not on any social media but LinkedIn. I just feel like I don't have even though I just told you many stories, I feel like my story isn't yet finished. So I don't want to tell you bits and pieces. I want to be able to tell you every single thing soundly. So no, I don't. Even with Instagram, I don't have anything to show right now. But, once I do, I'll definitely relay so that you can know where to find me.
Find him and Roger Adams on LinkedIn. And hey, Roger, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really can't wait to have you back on, especially if you take on more projects. I'd love to kind of bring you on and tell more stories, man, so we can inspire more people.
I appreciate you having me, Kent.
All right.